Well, let's take you now to the Joburg CBD, where our reporter Zikhona Tshona is stationed. Zikhona, what a day it has been, particularly for the families that have come to that scene with the hope of finding their loved ones. And of course, that hope would be that they find them still alive. What have you seen there?
And the death toll since this morning has just kept on rising, starting at 12 and then moving all the way to 63. And now it stands above the number 70. So certainly a very devastating day for all who have come here, particularly those family members who now have to find out that their loved ones did not make it. From what we understand, several of them have been taken to mortuaries in and around the city, and as far as Deep Kloof, we understand. So family members were coming out here throughout the day to try and see if they'll be given permission to identify their loved ones among those who lay dead here. But unfortunately, for so many of them, it was not to be. They are still running around trying to find any information they can with regards to where their loved ones are and did they make it alive out of this tragedy. I mean, people who lived in this building have told us how cramped it was, how overcrowded it was. We heard from officials describing it as an informal settlement inside the building. Up to 10 people or more could live in one room. So while those numbers are certainly very devastating and unbelievable, but it does raise the question then about settlement, human settlement. People are certainly very desperate to find cover. As we try and gather more information about this particular building, we've now come to understand that it used to be a shelter for survivors of gender-based violence, children as well as teenagers, which is why then a lot of those that have been affected by the fire here on this day are women and children. Among the dead, 10 of them are children, but officials continue to be on the scene and they are trying desperately to keep people away from entering the building. We did witness a short while ago those who believe that their rooms or their structures were not caught in the fire trying to get in so that they can save whatever they can. But of course, the building is guarded by both private security as well as the police, but there are onlookers on site. So, Kathy, if I can just take our viewers back to this morning, if you see those curtains hanging out of those windows, those were used by people who were desperately trying to escape the fire. And from people who were here at the time, they're saying even children, mothers, were using those curtains to save themselves as well as their children.
Now, when we talk structurally about what may exist beyond those walls and just, into those windows that you've just shown us, is that this idea of shacks being built inside the rooms. Of course, much of that is to try and partition the rooms and have some form of privacy. But that in the end also became a danger today because it's precisely part of what led to the difficulty when it came to evacuating that building.
This scene was active for much of this day. From what you understand, the fire started at around 12 o'clock. Emergency services say they got to the scene at around 1, but they've been on site, combing through, trying to save people from inside this building for much of this day. As we stand, the scene is very much so active. We've also come to understand that the said building does belong to the city of Johannesburg, so the city will then have to answer as to why this building stood here and then was inevitably hijacked by people, because those who lived in the shacks inside the building said there was someone that they were paying rent to be able to live in these structures. While the police continue to guard the building, there are people who are saying they still have valuables in there. There are people who are saying they and there are medication in there, there are children's clothing and diapers are in this building. So while we stand here, guarded by police, there are people who are angry and are saying they want to go inside the building and save whatever they can. But of course, Kathy, as you've mentioned, it has raised huge concerns, particularly around the hijacking of buildings in the city of Johannesburg, and then how those hijacked buildings are occupied. As you've mentioned, people were cramming themselves in here, and vulnerable people, in particular, women and children.
The sense from the officials that have come out there today, Zikhona, that there is a sense of responsibility and accountability for what has happened here, because it sounded to me for much of the day that, there seems to be a lot of passing the buck, and of course, the politicians blaming the NGOs that have taken them to court over the evictions. The NGOs also saying that, look, they have been defending people's human rights, and the politicians simply don't want to take responsibility for not doing their jobs.
And those officials who came out here are also saying that this is not the time to point fingers. More than 70 people have lost their lives here. Maybe then it's time for leaders to come together and look at the problem of accommodation and human settlement here in the Johannesburg CBD, particularly because we know that many people travel to Gauteng and in Joburg in particular, looking for jobs, looking for opportunities, and they find themselves in situations where they are housed or they have to find accommodations in structures that are hijacked, and they have to be crammed with other people. So maybe now, because lives have been lost, sadly so, it's time to look at a way forward. How do we then as a country avoid this from being repeated? That's also the word from community members who have been surrounding this building, many of them believing that since as far back as 2018, government should have done something about the structure. They're saying once it stopped being a shelter for GBV victims, they saw it deteriorate over the years, and according to people around this building, to them, government should have done something about it sooner.
Right, Zikhona Tshona out at the scene of this fire, and of course we'll continue our coverage, live coverage of the very latest. You would have seen some of the visuals there, Stephen, more officials arriving, and it looks like it's going to be that kind of evening really.